Hello, I'm the man who shouldn't speak, and I'm going to talk to you about the step sequence of values editor in Drambo 2.0. So moving on from our automation tutorial last time, we now come to this icon here, which looks a bit like a bar chart, but it contains various editors. We got velocity, gate, offset, probability, retrig, cycle, and comp. What are all of these? Well, let's go through them. Let's first of all just record a little sequence in by hitting record and play. Then we will come up with something. Truly genre-breaking music. Let's head here. I will actually change the MIDI to CV number of voices to 4 here, because we have a chord there, 3 notes. And if you remember from one of my previous videos, we have this note icon on the 2 notes. If you press one of the notes, it'll sound the entire chord. There we go. Yeah, so I just wanted to hear what that was. So here we enter by clicking on that, and we end up in the velocity editor. Now I was playing on the keys, and we can see that velocity is represented by how high this bar is. So there are no actual values in terms of how high it is. So for example, I can't actually see the exact velocity value here. However, you can assume that if it's right up to the top, it'll be at the highest velocity, which in MIDI terms will be 127, and then here would be 0. So somewhere halfway up, you'd be at like 64. So you can kind of work it out from there. Velocity only shows for the notes on the step as a whole, so it's fine if you have one note, because all I have here is a C2. I can see the velocity for that. I can move it around like that. But if I want to see velocity if I want to change velocity for a chord, if I have this chord is 3 notes, I believe. If I wanted to change the velocity of individual notes, I actually can't from this velocity view. Instead, and we're kind of jumping ahead, but I think it's useful to try and do everything velocity in one go. If we head to the comp here, then we select this. It says here, select step, select the step, shows you the step, and then here we can change the individual velocity of each individual note. So we have the A2, the D2 and the F2, so we can change it. So if you want a chord where you're playing one note really loudly, one note really softly, and one in between, you can adjust the velocity there. So that's just the kind of workaround for that. I believe people have been asking on the Drambo forum if there could be an option somewhere in the velocity tab for you to be able to change each note individually. We'll see if that comes about, but that is not currently in version 2.0. Okay, the other thing to know about velocity is velocity actually on? So here we have our patch here, and velocity is usually governed by the amp envelope. So we can see here that we have an amp envelope, and velocity at the moment is 0. If we play our sequence, then you may be able to notice that even though we have these velocity values in, velocities are actually sounding exactly the same, and that is because the velocity parameter here isn't turned on. So if you have velocity turned all the way up here, then velocity will react in full. So we should start playing some quieter notes here. There we go. Can now begin to tell that it's working. So that's how you activate velocity on the amp envelope. If you instead, I'm going to mute this track here by hitting M and then mute. I can also mute the track if I have to use my finger. It's either up or down. Can't remember which one. Up, up will solo it if you swipe up, swipe it down to mute the track. So yeah, I'll do that for that, because what I want to do is move over to this flexi sampler track that I have loaded here, and I'm just going to load in just a hi-hat sample. That one will do fine. I'll place a few of these along here. Oh, turn the reverb off of it. And I'll adjust the velocity of these. As you can see, as you can hear, exactly the same again. That is, once again, because there's no velocity actually activated on them. On a flexi sampler, the velocity is located here. You turn that up and all of a sudden it will begin to play properly there, as you would hope. If you're on a track and you can't see an amp envelope, then if you hit the plus, hit processor, scroll, amp envelope ADSR is your friend there. So that's great. So that's velocity accept. Just to say that there is a quite handy option here. If you hit plus on the velocity tab, then you can actually draw in your notes, draw in the velocity of the notes, and then if it's too many notes, you just get rid of them by tapping on them. So that's quite handy for very quickly creating a sequence. The next one we have is gate. Now this is governed, I believe, having experimented a little bit. I think this is one of those ones where you have to have once again the amp envelope ADSR on, because what happens is if I unmute this track, in fact I will remove any confusion. This top one is where the decay value is at. However, this one here, this little white line, is actually a scene lock. I'm sure I'll cover scenes in a future tutorial, but I want to just get rid of that now. I held the scene B here, and I double tapped on the line, and it vanished. I wouldn't want to confuse anyone with that. If we move over to the gate here, we could see that by default these are at 100%, which means that the notes will be as long as the decay is set to before they fall off. But then what we might want to do is change these so that the gate is a lot shorter on a few of them, and we'll see what effect that has on the sound. And as you can see, you hear even, that is affecting how long the gate of the note is held open for. Now this certainly appears to only work if you have an amp envelope there. I'll quickly remove this amp envelope. That was a mistake. Put that back there. Yeah, you have to have amp envelope there, because otherwise the wavetable oscillator will just play forever. Let's try this instead on track number 5, where we were before. And if we make the velocities all the same, it's not velocity, is it? That's velocity. What you should be able to see there is that I've reduced the gate on them, on a few of them, and yet they're still sounding exactly the same as they were before. That's because we haven't got the ADSR envelope in here. If we have that, then what will happen is play this. At the moment they're all the same, but then as soon as I start reducing this, that isn't working either. Okay, so what I've worked out is that what you actually need to do is you have to fiddle around with the decay here for it to work in the kind of same recognisable way as it would do on a synth track, but it certainly. Let me play this now. See, you can hear the result there. So this gate is certainly something that seems to work a little bit more effectively on a synth track. Unless I'm doing something horribly wrong, which is always possible. Moving on to offset. I'm just gonna check my watch here. That's all fine. Move to offset. Now this governs where on the grid a note will hit. So let's jump over track 1 again. Let's get rid of the sequence. So let's highlight all of those. Hit clear. I'll get rid of everything, and it should also get rid of any velocity or gate values I have set. I'll record another sequence. Lower the volume of this slightly so you can hear me. And what I'll do now is I'll fiddle around with the offset. Now, if the offset's on 0, then the note will hit entirely on the grid. So you can see the transport, so it hits exactly in the right place. However, as soon as we begin to insert a value into here, it will begin to move off the grid to the right. So it'll move it in between this step here and the next step. The closer we have it to here, the closer it'll be on the grid to this step. When we move it, another bump mistake. As soon as if we move it all the way up, then it'll effectively be right at the edge of this and encroaching on that one. So actually place a note here, and then we'll be able to hear. If we do halfway up here, we should find that this note's completely on the grid. This note's completely on the grid. This one is halfway between here and here. This note will sound literally just before the chord. There we go, and we can turn on the metronome completely all the time. I usually only have it on when I'm recording. We'll be able to see exactly what's happening here. So listen to the metronome. I'll change it again. So that is offset. Offset is, well, probably used, I'd say, more in drums. If I move to this kick track that I have here, I'm going to mute the other two that we have going at the moment. I have a kick track here. If I do just a 4 on the floor thing here, and actually, yeah, I will leave the metronome on for a second. Then what happens here is that we can use the offset again. If we do that, you'll be able to hear that it's not on the grid anymore. And if we play some drums that are on the grid, as you can hear, that even though I have a completely grid-based pattern here, because these kicks are off, it sounds a bit weird, you know. You can, but what you can do is you can introduce a kind of elements of groove by just offsetting notes slightly. It also can humanize notes a bit if they're slightly off the grid. However, there is a better way to achieve that, which I'll tell you about in just a second. the thing about offset is that it'll only move a note to the right, so towards this step here for this particular note with offset on. So if you want to instead move a note to the left, so it's encroaching onto this step's territory, that can't yet happen, I'm afraid. What people have asked for on the Drambo forum is for perhaps the like there to be a medium line here for offset, where that represents on the grid. You could have values below that line representing moving towards the step before, and offset values above the line moving it to the step after. However, that isn't in place yet. Not sure if it will come into place, but that's what people have asked for. But in the meantime, you can only move it offset this way. Yes, I mentioned talking about humanizing slightly, and I'll talk about that now. What you need to do, I have this this little pattern here, and in fact I'll record some more notes. What you can do is to insert a humanizer module up here. It's somewhere in the MIDI list. Where are we? Yes. And these three values will randomize based on how much you raise the knob by. So the offset here, what it means is that if you have it set to an offset of 1 millisecond, then Drambo will randomly assign a value offset between 0 and 1 millisecond. You can also humanize the velocity, which is really cool for like hi-hats. You can just kind of, if you have it set to a relatively low value, it's still kind of perceptible to the human ear that they're not being played exactly the same volume, and that is cool because it means that your drum sequence, for example, won't sound quite so ordered and mechanical. That's a thing with the electronic drums. A lot, they always just sound exactly the same. So if you can introduce some variation in there, that can help. Well, yes, humanize your patterns. Let's play this and see what happens if we have this. See, as we're raising that offset, it becomes a bit weird, but if you have it just a little bit, that'd be quite cool. Also, if we do the velocity, and then you can hear it you can really hear it at the high end of that. So that's a cool tip for well, I say it's a cool tip, that's arrogance. It's a tip nonetheless, for humanizing your sequences, kind of having the timing of a hit not being always 100% on the grid in a way that humanizes it, rather than having it as an offset where it'll play the same every time. Except will it? Because next we're going to move on to probability. Okay, so let's move on to probability, which can vary your sequences so hugely. It's very important, and I think what's weird about it is it's only really come in the last few years. Before this, we just accepted the concept that having a sequencer would mean that it just repeated the same pattern over and over again, unless you created new patterns. But you were back then often limited to 16 steps, maybe up to 64 if you were very lucky, and you'd have to copy and paste a pattern and then make variations within that. And your machine might not be able to hold very many patterns at all. But here in 2022, particularly in Drambo 2.0, we are blessed to have many options. Let's create a new clip to show off probability. So I will come out of here. So, let's see the clip editor. Let's create a blank row by pressing plus. Let's ensure that all of our clips are on that row so that we won't actually be playing anything we've recorded before. Just check that. Yep. So I can turn mute off again now because I won't actually be playing anything. Move to track number 3. Let's play in some drums, and we'll have a look at the probability editor. So move this up here. I'll choose some pads. Here we go. So a very simple sequence there. Let's see what hi-hats we got here. So yeah, let's put in some more hi-hats in places where there aren't any notes at the moment. See what happens to the beat here. Okay, so now let's change the probabilities and see what happens. By moving this bar up and down, well, when you do so, you see how it creates a little note of what's happening there, so that if you come out of here, then you'll know you've edited the note in some way. If we begin to play around with these a bit. So as we can hear, just by playing with the probability, we ensure that we can ensure that no time through the sequence is the same as at any time before it, and that can really vary things up. You might want to, though, at least have a recognisable element to your sequence, because otherwise, if it gets completely weird and unrecognisable in terms of what the underlying beat actually is, can really confuse the audience. For example, if I put in a note for all of these here and then reduce the probability to very low for all of these, then we'd have a lot of variation, but also what we might not have is any kind of structure in terms of knowing what's happening. See, that's it's not really working. Whereas if we have at least, for example, these notes happening pretty much all the time. Actually, we'll have this happening all the time. Then that just lends a kind of just orients the listener. So yeah, so probability up here is 100%. Probability all the way down below here is 0%, and you can raise it up. As before, you can't actually see the values that are happening here, unless there is a way to see the exact value, which is you go into the comp here and hit D2, then probability is the random condition here. So we can see that this this note here, this D2, has a probability of 45 out of 100. And if we look at one thing that you can't do with probability, it's similar to the velocity. You can't edit the probability of the individual notes of a chord or two sounds played at the same time on the same step. So if we were to enter two notes here at the same time, actually let's do three notes at the same time. I've now turned that into a chord. I have a C2, a a D2 and an E2, which are this kick, this hi-hat, and this open hi-hat. That's a closed hi-hat. That's an open hi-hat. Yeah. Then if we change the probability of them, it would change it for all 3 notes of the chord, which might not be what we want. So if we head over to the comp here, we select our chord. Here we see that 58 is being applied to all of them. However, we can then change this so that there's an individual probability for every note. If we just drag across here, add the random, then if we tell you what we'll do is we'll come up here, we'll head to prob, and we'll remove every note apart from this one. You see, even though I'm removing the notes, the probability is left behind for a few of them, which is interesting. Is that a bug? I have no idea. So we got one's playing. We had one note playing there, one note playing there. Occasionally we'll have 2 or more. There you go. So that's how you affect more than one note completely differently in a chord. Let's move on. That's not a phrase. Let's move on to Retrig. Let's get rid of all of these. The way you do that is you highlight everything. No, that's not it at all. You highlight everything with select on, because highlighting everything just adds a note for the whole of that. So let's try that again. Select everything, hit clear. That'll clear absolutely everything that's in there. We haven't put anything on anything else here, so that's good. Just come out of the select tool, and that will remove the message up there. So let's talk about Retrig. So what should we do here? Let's do a snare on these 2. Let's do a kick on these 2. Very simple sequence. Now Retrig, as you might expect, re-triggers the note to happen twice or more before this next step. So let's see what happens if I drag up here. We get 2. Drag up here, we get 3, and so on. So if we do like hi-hats, we can have a pretty glitchy thing happening here. As usual, it will depend on the sounds that you have. So if you have a more electronic drum kit than the kind of more acousticy one that we have here, then it will be affected more. You can use Retrig with probability quite nicely. So if we have, say, this note here, if we lower the probability of that, then we could only have this glitch happening occasionally. Actually, I should remove this completely so we can hear it more. We're playing it a few times through. We haven't had it for a while, but it will eventually sound. There we go. Nice. So that's another way to vary up your sequences. Now, a way to make a pattern seem longer than it actually is to do the cycle. So if I'm going to record in another little easy beat. Oh, that's terrible. And I'll increase the probability of all the notes. It was remembering what was in there before, so it was just applying the same probability to any new notes that I created for ones that were here. So let's do the cycle and explain what this is. If I drag up here, that will determine the number of cycles that the cycle condition is being applied to. So I've dragged up 4 here. That means that there'll be 4 cycles of this particular loop that currently happen, which governs what I place in here. So to explain this, oops, if I drag up again to get 4 and I put this in loop 1, loop 3, it's actually bar 1 and bar 3, because yeah, we have the loops only a bar. So bar 1, bar 3, it plays. Cycle 3 it's played, hasn't played cycle 4, and we return cycle 1. Isn't in cycle 2, isn't in cycle 3, isn't in cycle 4. And we can do this for any one of these notes. And let's do that one there, and then we can do 5 cycles for this one, and have 3 and 4, etc. So you can begin to see how, by using cycle conditions, retrig, probability, all these things, you can really vary your sequences hugely. And then when you add to that the velocity, so playing the notes at different volumes, also the offset, playing notes off the grid, so these are all combinations of things that can lead to your sequences becoming incredibly varied. And you can also govern, as I said before, how much things kind of are regular and how things are irregular. So you can either have a lot of randomness, or you can have just targeted randomness, just to introduce enough variation that a loop can play for a while and not seem just like it's, you know, just boring after a while. And that's happening with drums, but of course we have our synth track here, and it can do exactly the same with that. So let's record a little sequence here. I've no idea what I'm going to play. And you can tell I had no idea what I was going to play, because it recorded 1 bar when actually I wanted more than that. But that was user error. If I cleared all of the notes from here, well, there are a few ways actually. I could either swipe right here to increase the number of bars, or I can just clear all the notes. After I clear all of them, then I'll be able to do my auto grow. I can select which parts of the loop I want to affect. So if I selected everything here, it would show the whole thing. That one, select 1 bar. I can loop the bars, which can also that's also a performance tool. So let's change a few of these. Let's actually just enlarge the whole thing. Let's change a few of these, so that we have a few that play every time, and we have others that only play certain times. You can use Retrig on the synth as well. It's not, it's not the same effect as it is with drums. So your mileage may vary on what you actually think of that. Let's move a couple of notes just a bit off the grid. Ooh. Change the gate as well for a few of these. See what madness happens here. What madness is going to happen here. And because I was playing on the piano keys, we already have some velocity here. The ones that I was playing lower have higher velocity. The ones I was playing further up the keys have lower velocity. whether it's cycles here. Let's talk quickly about the comp. So as we've seen, we have the random, we also have the retrig afterwards on this one too, but let's explore a couple of the other ones that we have, a couple of the other options. You always need to place your probability one before the note. Retrig happens after the note, so if you want to manually place these things, then you have to know which side of the note it needs to be, and this would make sense because the note's already played, and then we want it to play 4 times. Whereas when we insert the random here, we want it to choose before the note whether to play it or not. So there we go. I hope that explains that. Jump condition. If you want your pattern to be not restricted to 16 steps per bar, that's what this is about. So let's say we always want it here, as soon as this one plays, we want it to return to the beginning of the pattern. Then we have here, actually we can place it afterwards, and then what should happen, it should play this note and then return to the start. Let's have a look. So this is where we can enter polyrhythm or polymeter, I never remember which one's which, territory, where we don't have to have 16 steps in a bar. We can have fewer than that, which is cool. And you can select where you want it to jump back to. So if we say 8 here, then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in effect, it would then loop every time after the first time. So let's have a look at this. Here we go. There we go. And it would still, for everything here, be applying the different probabilities and anything else that you have set up there. One other thing you can do with the jump is insert a random condition to affect the jump itself. Let's just record something and I will help you work this out. Okay, so let's just loop this bit. Then we'll head into our editor. What we want to do here, so we want to jump to step number 5 each time. As you can hear, what's happening is it is looping like that. However, if we then insert a random here and reduce it to say 38%, what happens is it'll loop round sometimes to step 5, but then other times it won't. There we go. We had a loop there. So that's a way to really kind of mix up your sequences. You know, not necessarily in a way that's particularly musical, but certainly if you were, say, if you're doing some kind of ambient-y, drone-y kind of thing, that could be quite interesting to possibly play all of a clip, or not all of a clip, return to a point, and you could insert a variety of these jumps and randoms all over the place. Then you have probability as well, you have offset, etc. You have retrig. You can really create some sequences that could just go on forever and never be the same. One thing to watch out for, though, is I have this selected here, and when I press play, it comes off the one that was selected. And in fact, at that point, up to now, you've been able to select the step and it'll show that step and what's on it. But it seems at the moment there's kind of a bug where if you hit play, then all of a sudden, even though you're on this screen and it says select the step, that's actually not happening, and it will get rid of the step rather than playing it. However, as you can see, the jump is actually here. It remains on there, even though there's no note there anymore. We still have the random and the jump. So even though you may have removed a note, you may not have actually removed what's behind the note. So if you want to do that, then you select the note. I was about to say that should come up with a. There you go. If you select a note that's outside the editor screen, then you can clear anything that's on it. So I have a very simple sequence entered here, and I've inserted a once, just in the same way as you insert other things, and that means that this note should only play the first time through the sequence and then won't play again. Let's see if it works. There we go. It isn't playing anymore. Okay, let's quickly talk about scenes. I'll record a scenes video at some point explaining some way to use scenes, but for now, because we're in the component view, if we add a scene condition to this trig here, and we can select scene B, this will mean this note will only play when we're actually on scene B. So when we're on scene A or any other scene, it won't play at all. It should only play when the crossfader is over to scene B. I'm not sure if when it passes the halfway point or whether it's all the way. Let's check this out. So it's not playing at all now. See what happens if we're all the way over. It plays. See what happens if we're. Yeah, it's playing if we're past the halfway point. There we go. So that's an interesting one. You can have notes play that only play during certain scenes. I'm going to get rid of this, and now I'm going to hit transpose, which is, as you might expect, just increasing the octave, the note value. In fact, I've entered this the wrong side. This is one of those ones that has to go with the right side, I think. There we go. Yes, because the note, you're saying that the note should play, and then you're saying it should transpose. That's another one. Maybe we should make a list of which ones should go on the left and which ones should go on the right. But yeah, so you can transpose this, but then what you also need to be aware of is that you can, again, put random behind this as well. You can make a trigger more. There we go. Yep, so you can have a note play normally, or you can have it play higher randomly, we can have it play higher on a cycle. No, there are plenty of, or on a scene. Then yeah, so various ways you can affect your sequences there. And the goal, as with all this really, is to just introduce a variation, as much variation as you want, as much or as little as you want. Anyway, so that's the end of this mammoth video. I'm sure there are more things to say on all this, but as usual, running crazy over long. So just say thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe, please, if you like this kind of thing. And we'll move on next time. I think we might cover the morph module, which is new in Drambo 2.0. Until then, have a lovely rest of the day or rest of the evening, whatever you're up to, and I'll speak to you all soon. Cheers, guys. Bye.